you. Good morning, members and officers, and welcome to this meeting of the Licensing Committee, which is today, March 31st. And we're here to consider the items of business set out on the agenda before you. So before I start, could I please ask our clerk, Joe Tyler, to tell us with regard to housekeeping? Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Chair. Please note that this meeting of the Licensing Committee is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council's website for a minimum of 6 months. In order to ensure the meeting is managed effectively, please could everyone present follow these ground rules for speaking. Only speak when invited to by the Chair. Please state your name before you speak if you have not been introduced already. Please ensure that you unmute yourself and always turn on the video function before speaking. Please mute your microphone when you are not speaking. After each party has made their representation, the Chair will ask each person in turn if they have any questions or comments. However, if at any point you would like to speak again, please use the raise hand function at the top right of the screen, and do please remember to lower your hand once you have finished speaking. Finally, please ensure background noise is kept to a minimum and that mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. So I will now ask people in turn to state their name and their role, and I will start with myself. My name is Councillor Judes Butt. I'm Chair of the Licensing Committee and Chair of this full Licensing Committee hearing this hearing. Moving on to Councillor Julie Bagwell. She is my Vice Chairman. She's not with us at the moment. She will be joining us soon. Councillor Sarah Anderson.
Good morning. My name's Councillor Sarah Anderson and I'm representing Moordown Ward.
Thank you, Sarah. And Councillor David Brown.
Morning, Chair. It's Councillor David Brown. I'm a ward member for Bearwood and Merley Ward.
Thank you, David. Councillor Richard Burton.
Good morning, Chair. I'm Councillor Richard Burton and I'm also a member for Bearwood and Merley Ward.
Thank you, Richard. And Councillor Norman Norman Decent, where that came from. That's Norman Decent.
Good morning. I'm Councillor Norman Decent, representing West Howe and Kinston. Thank you.
My apologies, Councillor Decent. I have a friend called Norman Neat.
I much prefer it.
Councillor Brian Dion, thank you.
Councillor Brian Dion, I represent Penn Hill Ward.
Thank you, Brian. Councillor George Farquhar.
Councillor George Farquhar, and I'm for Boscombe East and Folkestone.
Thank you, George. Councillor Dwayne Farr.
Good morning, Chair. I'm Councillor Dwayne Farr for Kinston Ward. Thank you.
Thank you, Dwayne. Thank you. I believe we have apologies from Councillor David Flagg and Councillor Andy Hadley. We'll hear those later. Councillor Toby Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Johnson, Alderney and Bourne Valley Ward.
Thank you, Toby. And Councillor Dave Kelsey.
Yeah, morning, Chair. Councillor Dave Kelsey, Eastcliff and Springbourne Ward.
Thank you, David. And Councillor Lawrence Williams.
Yes, good morning. I'm representing Littledown and Iford.
Thank you. And I did omit to say Creekmore, Hilborn and Waterloo. Thank you. And now on to our officers. Nananka. Yes. Bobby, I am so sorry, Councillor Dove. Of course you were here, had early apologies. Would you like to introduce yourself? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bobby Dove for Littledown and Iford at BCP Council. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bobby. Sorry to have omitted you. And now on to our officers. Nananka Randall.
Good morning, Nananka Randall, Licensing Manager for BCP Council.
Morning, Nananka. Becky Baker.
Good morning, Becky Baker, Senior Licensing Officer at BCP Council.
Thank you, Becky. And Joanne McNamara.
Joanne McNamara, Senior Lawyer and Legal Advisor to the Licensing Committee today.
Thank you, Joanne. And Joe Tyler.
Good morning, Joe Tyler, Democratic Services Officer and Clerk for the meeting today. Thank you.
Thank you. And our applicant, Chris Saunders.
Morning, Chair. Chris Saunders, Director of Destination and Culture for BCP Council.
Good morning, Chris. Nobody else that I've omitted. My apologies again, Councillor Dove, for omitting of itself. So moving on, we have apologies from the following, please, Joe.
Yes, thank you, Chair. We've received apologies for this meeting from Councillor David Flagg and Councillor Andy Hadley. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And Councillor Bagwell will be joining us as soon as she possibly can. Late arrival. Now, with regard to declarations of interest, members, this is on the flowchart, page 2 of your agenda. If there are any declarations of interest, could you please raise your hand and declare your interest? Thank you. I can see none. Therefore, I will take it as no declarations of interest were relevant. Moving on then to item 3, confirmation of minutes. Committee is asked today to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 4th of March as an accurate record. May I have a seconder for these, please? Would somebody like to second these minutes? Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, Chair, I was happy to second them for you.
Thank you, Councillor Farr. So if we're all happy to take them, are there any dissensions? Please raise your hand. Any abstentions? No, it looks like that is unanimous. Thank you, members. So moving on to item 4, public issues, there were none received for this meeting. And moving on to item 5, which is a new premise licence application for Christchurch Beaches. That's been withdrawn, so there is no hearing with regards to that item. And moving on then to the substantive, which is item 6, new premises licence application for Mudford Quay, Christchurch. Can I please check that before we start, that all persons who have given notice of their intention to speak have been identified, and any person who wishes to withdraw representation or wishes not to speak has also been identified. If there's any issue, please raise your hand and raise your issue. I can see nothing. Okay, I will now explain proposed procedure for today. Our licensing officer, Becky Baker, will present her report, and there'll be questions of Becky Baker by members and the applicant, Chris Saunders. The applicant, Chris Saunders, will then make his application, and there'll be questions of the applicant, Chris Saunders, by all parties. That's members of the committee to go first, and then Betty Baker. Usually responsible authorities and other persons would make their representations after this, but there are none today. And then there would be questions of the responsible authorities and other persons of the committee, but there are none, so those 2 items fall. All parties will then be given the opportunity to sum up, with the party who spoke last to go first, so that'll be Becky Baker, and then Chris Saunders, and then the hearing will conclude. The committee will deliberate in private with the legal advisor and clerk present. And what we will do is when we get to item 6, we will then hear quickly item 7 and 8, because one is deferment and one is a withdrawal, and then we will retire to deliberate. Notification of the committee's decision will be given within the period of 5 working days, beginning with the day or the last day on which the hearing was held, which is today, in accordance with the regulations. The notification of decision will include information about the right of appeal as appropriate. So I'd just like all parties to confirm agreement on the proposed procedure or make representations. So if you have any representations, could you raise your hand? If you're silent, I will take that as read. I can see no hands. Thank you. So I would ask then for Becky Baker to agree the procedure, please.
Yes, I agree with the procedure.
Thank you. And Chris Saunders, your agreement as well, please.
Yes, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Finally, for all speakers, please do not repeat any subject matter and keep to the topic discussed, and all questions are to be asked through the chair, and there's to be no cross-examination of parties. So I would now like to ask that the licensing officer, Betty Baker, present her report. Thank you, Becky.
Good morning, all. So today's hearing is for an application that was submitted by Stephen Hardwick of BCP Council for a premises licence for Mudford Quay, and it's essentially asking for regulated entertainment between the hours of 10 AM and 11 PM at night. There is no alcohol being applied for with this application. A licence was previously held for this area by Christchurch Borough Council, and this licence has been surrendered. The licence that was held by Christchurch Borough Council actually asked for more hours than what BCP are currently applying for. We've received a total of 3 representations from the public, and these are shown at Appendix 4. The applicant has agreed that conditions suggested by both Environmental Health at Appendix 5 and the Police at Appendix 6 are to be attached to the premises licence should the licence be granted. Okay.
Thank you very much, Becky. Members, are there any questions for Becky on points of fact? If there are, please raise your hand. Okay, I have one for you, Becky. Could I take you to page 121, please, of the pack?
Yes.
That is the, as far as I can understand it, that is the previous permissions from Christchurch Council.
Yes.
Could you please explain their relevance, please? Because we have got these in our pack. I did check what it was, but for the purposes of the committee and the public, thank you.
It was basically just to show that we have already had a licence in this area. It's not something that that BCP are just applying for. Historically, there has always been a premises licence in this area of Christchurch.
Thank you, Becky. And members, you will note that the hours of this are indeed earlier and longer than that which is being applied for. I think that has some relevance in our consideration. So just to note that. Thank you. Chris, do you have any questions for Becky Baker, please?
No, Chair. No at this stage.
Good morning, Councillor Bagwell.
Chair, I have my hand raised.
Thank you, Councillor Kelsey.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I wonder, Becky, if you could explain a couple of things to me, or it may actually have to go over to legal. I noticed that the police have put a condition in asking for a management event plan to be submitted 28 days before any 10 notice is put in. Is that actually legal? Because somebody could actually put in a late 10, which would only be up to 10 days before the event. So therefore, we will be restricting them from being able to put a 10 in if we accepted that condition.
Thank you, David. Becky?
Yeah, just bear with me because I just getting to the police's condition again, because I thought it said 28 days before the event.
Yeah, but if somebody wanted to put a 10 in, you can put a 10 in 10 days before the event takes place legally.
You can do, but this premises licence only applies to events that use this licence, and a 10 wouldn't necessarily use this licence.
So why are the police putting that stipulation in as a condition?
They're saying for the start of each event that uses this premises licence. So
they're saying for a 10. If you read their condition, it says for a 10.
No later than 28 days before the start of each event, this premises licence will submit to the licensing authority.
In the event of a 10, it says.
I'm sorry, Councillor. Where could you tell me?
I'm just coming to. I just
sat here thinking I haven't seen that.
Have you got the Councillor Kelsey? Have you got the actual written iterate?
Yeah, I'm just coming down.
Because that's where he said that, but I think in the actual condition that isn't stated.
It says, for page 144. It says no later than 28 days before the start of each event, the licence holder will submit to the licensing authority. It doesn't say nothing about, it doesn't say for a 10, but if we are having 10s and they still expect that condition to be held.
They wouldn't expect it to be held for a 10. It's for an event which is using this licence. So I can't think of an event down at Mudderford. RNLI. They have an RNLI fun day down at Mudderford Quay, so the police would then want the event management plan submitted 28 days before, but you wouldn't require that for a 10.
But on that note, if I applied for a 10 on those premises, then the conditions of this licence do not apply to a 10. So you've got on here no music after 11 o'clock at night, for example.
Yeah.
A 10 notice, I could have music after 10 o'clock at night.
This is where the Licensing Act gets nice and complicated for us. For a regular temporary event notice, a responsible authority such as the police or environmental health can ask for the conditions that are on a premises licence to apply to the 10. So unless the police or environmental health say, I want these conditions to apply to the 10, then you're correct, the conditions would not apply.
Okay. Just wanted that clarified for everyone to hear. That was the point I was trying to get to, Becky. Sorry to go a long way around it.
That's fine.
But I just wanted members that weren't aware about that to understand that if I apply for a 10, only the police and environmental health can actually object to that 10 and would have to ask for those conditions. So thank you very much for that, Becky.
Yes, thank you, David. Hence why they want that notification. And it was actually mentioned in the one of the letters, one of the emails, David. It was actually there. So that's where you've seen it with Sergeant Gosling and saying a 10 at the same time. Are there any further questions? Councillor Kelsey, your hand's still up. Did you want to come back? Secondary?
No, I'm fine. Thank you, Chair.
OK, lovely. So if there are no questions from Chris, then we will move on and we will ask that Chris Saunders puts forward his case for the applicant. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Would you mind if I deferred that to Helen Wildman, who's also on the call, who's our events manager and is probably better placed to give you the detail than myself, to make sure you've got the exact detail? That'd be okay.
One moment. I was advised yesterday that you in fact were replacing John. So now you're being replaced by Helen. I didn't realise Helen was even on the call. My apologies, Helen.
It's not a case of being replaced. It's just a case of the two of us doing this together, and we planned it so that Helen could do the initial presentation, if that's okay. Apologies to John. He's here.
Yes, I was aware that Helen was on the call. Helen, are you on the call?
Good morning, Chair. Yes, I am.
Oh, my apologies, Helen, for not inviting you to introduce yourself. Thank you, Chris. Perhaps you'd like to do that now and then put your case forward. Thank you, Helen.
Yeah, so good morning, everybody. My name's Helen Wildman and I am one of the event managers for BCP Council.
That's fine, Helen, if you'd like to put your case forward. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So just to give you a little bit of background, and I know that Becky from the licensing team has touched on it, there was a previous premise licence in place within Christchurch Borough Council. Since the formation of BCP Council, we are now part of a centralised events team. So that's basically taking the experience across all three of the towns and putting it into one centralised team, and therefore we wanted to bring the licenses together so that they were all in keeping, and one of those aspects, which has also been mentioned as part of the police conditions, was to ensure that there's a process within the premise licenses that any large event that was to take place comes through what's industry standard and what we hold as in the events team as part of a multi-agency safety advisory group. So that would be the process that any of these events would go through. So there is a greater control by being able to have that as a condition of the premise licence, rather than individual 10s where I think Councillor Kelsey mentioned don't necessarily have any conditions on there unless the police or environmental health objects. So within the premise licence, any potential event organiser would need to agree to use that premise licence and agree to the terms. And within that, there is a full event management process that they need to undertake. And this is something that potentially the residents of Mudderford Quay haven't seen before, because we haven't had a full event season with COVID since that formation of that centralised events team. Within that, we have so there's monthly meetings where we present all of the event management plans and the proposals for large events, and representation from that are on people such as environmental health, such as highways, such as licensing, all of the emergency services, and collectively we look through an event organiser's plans, and we look to make sure that they are safe, they're not going to disturb the residents, and that there's a process in place. So there's a very robust event management process that any applicant wanting to go ahead and put an event on to this space would take place, of which we facilitate, and we would then go through any concerns that any of those agencies raise and work with the organisers to make sure that we move past that and we find a resolution. I think also it is just to note that we have worked with the police and environmental health officers to agree conditions which we're very happy with, because they fall within that event management process, so we don't have any issues with them, and those conditions will mean that there would only actually be a maximum of 3 events per year that use the events process. So although as part of the license, because we don't know when the events necessarily will take place, we apply for a bulk of time for any day of the week. There is a restriction that we have agreed with environmental health as a maximum of these. We also, just another point just to note, again, if there's any large event that was to take place, as part of our process to ensure that there are no issues, there is an on-call process for a member of the events team that our out of hours council line has. So if there was ever an issue with an event in terms of noise or any other reason, then we would be called to come out and to deal with that on site. And currently there are a couple of events that are provisionally planned in. It's obviously very difficult at the moment given the circumstances we're in with COVID, but there are some provisionals in the diary, and they're long-standing events that have taken place prior, and that would need to come into making sure that they put together that event plan, and that all aspects of their plans are looked over and residents considered within it. That gives you just an overview, Chair, of where we're at.
Thank you very much. I have a few questions. Members, are there any questions for Helen or Chris with regard to the application? If you'd like to indicate, put your hand up. Okay, I'm not seeing any hands. I'll put my question then. You mentioned with regard to keeping the events to 3 events per year. Reading the documentation, this does refer when there's amplified music. So is it when there's amplified music that it's just 3 amplified music events, or is it just 3 events per se? We would be within the planning of any event plan, and where we look through them and agree use of the land. It would be very much with breaks, so we would make sure that if an event was taking place through that whole time, there would be breaks in between there, and there would be a noise management plan put together, which would include informing residents. Right, so it is for the purposes of mitigating any harm with regard to the licensing objectives that these hours have been chosen. Right, thank you very much. Okay. Becky Baker, do you have any questions for Helen?
No, I don't, thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. We do have to the 3 objections which have been received, and I think it's important, members, if you are mindful of those and whether there are any questions that might emanate from the objections. We don't have the objectors with us to put their case forward, but perhaps I could just take you through them quickly. The first one, none of them are named, but the first one, if you have it in front of you, it's, I'm not sure what the page is where they actually appear, but you'll find them on your pack in front of you. And I think I will read them out for the purposes of public record. The first one says, I think the best representation I can give you is in regard to the prevention of public nuisance, which I believe this application will exacerbate rather than contain. There's a long history of nighttime disturbance on the quay, particularly in the summer months, due to alcohol and just general bad behaviour. I think the blanket application for so late a licence is misjudged, although it is, of course, 2 hours later and an hour earlier, as previously stated, even if Christchurch Council has applied for it. I think you will find less opposition if the licensing hours were at 8 p.m. or 9 p.m. rather than 11 p.m. I would encourage you to consider the local residents who live all around the quay and the police who will get called when these incidents transpire. Finally, the noise carries across water very well at night, disturbing all the people who have houses around the area. So with that in train, could I ask a question of you, please, Helen, if you could come back? Could you advise us, please, with regards to the noise that may travel across the water? You didn't raise the representation that this was an issue. Could you please confirm that, advise the committee?
So within any, if there was a large event, there would be a noise management plan that's put together, and that would cover the areas of noise. That would make sure that there was breaks. It would make sure that residents were informed, and it would make sure when we look at somebody's plans on their positioning of something such as a stage, if that was something that was going to be part of it, that was positioned away from residents. So we would work with the organisers and also with environmental health to make sure that any impacts minimised, and environmental health have within their conditions put conditions with regards to noise. They have we've agreed then with them to make sure that there is an undue noise at any resident property.
Thank you. And if there are any questions, member, please do chime in. And the other one was more of a confirmation in the due to alcohol and just general bad behaviour. There's no alcohol application for this actual licence, so that would fall. And the last one, the statement, the police who will get called to these incidents. Again, a clarification that the police representation was withdrawn when conditions were set. So I believe that this has been overcome. I'll be advised by our legal advisor if she wishes to say anything at this juncture. Okay, I'm not hearing anything. So moving on then to the objection 2. I think it's only fair we read them out as the members aren't here. The members of the public aren't here. So the second one is, good morning. As residents on Mudford Quay, we strongly object this application and record as follows. Firstly, we appreciate this is a universal application for BCP Council, but our concerns that some events and the hours proposed are totally inappropriate for this area. On a busy summer day weekend, we understand that the last summer, some 2,500 vehicles for 450 parking spaces on one day alone entered the quay via Chichester Way, creating traffic jam around Mudford. Vehicles were being parked on single and double yellow lines and outside entrances to residents' driveways throughout the Mudford locality. This would be very detrimental to the emergency services trying to gain access to the quay. On most days in the summer, all the car parks, especially in the quay, is normally at full capacity by early morning, and on a nice winter's day, this could be up to 50% capacity, if not more. Of recent date, tow-away signs have been erected around the quay area due to these parking issues. The whole area in general suffers enough with parking problems, including overnight camping, RVs, caravan tents, lighting of fires and barbecues, resulting in lots of rubbish left and bins overflowing. By BCP's own admission of recent press reports, we are overrun in the locality by visitors. This application will only encourage more events, leading to more visitors. The quay area of recent times has become overwhelmed by many events. Some of these are getting too large and extreme and should be curtailed, especially the proposals for carnivals and circuses. For example, the Seafood Festival was organised, most of which bore little relation to seafood, and in some cases the participants are amateur and professional traders. The impact of this application will no doubt encourage more traders, traffic noise, pollution, rubbish, antisocial behaviour, and will not be the benefit of local residents in this area of outstanding natural beauty. Could we hear from you, please, Becky, with regards to the vehicles and the traffic and how SAG might impact upon that, and what checks and balances will be in place to provide for that? Thank you.
Okay. Firstly, with regards to vehicles, that doesn't obviously come under one of the licensing objectives, so we can't consider it from a licensing point of view. When it talks about emergency access, I'd like to point out that the fire brigade were consulted on the application and they didn't raise any issues about vehicle access to the quay. As part of the event management plan, I believe that would be traffic and all parking would be considered in the event management plan, and that event management plan will go to a SAG where all the responsible authorities will be consulted on it again. So there's a big consultation process to make sure that things like this don't happen.
Thank you very much.
I don't know if Helen can help.
Thank you, Helen. If you'd like to further comment.
Yeah, so just to confirm, the highways are on the Safety Advisory Group membership, so they have full consultation on plans. We also, for a big event, would send out something called an emergency services notification. So even although they are on the SAG and aware, we also send that out just prior to an event taking place, and that gets put to all of the control rooms. So there is a process of communication to make sure that everyone knows what's taking place where. There was also some conversations on some previous events, and I think this is where the centralised process will help, because some of these processes may not have happened previously, and we're bringing in that industry standard across that BCP centralised team to make sure that those events in Christchurch do have those event management plans and that they are going to a safety advisory group.
Thank you, Helen. Councillor Brown, you have your hand up. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just those representations brought forward a question in my mind. Obviously, in considering this application, it needs to be sort of evidence-based, you know, what we're looking at. And I think particularly the first representation raised about a long history of nighttime disturbance on the quay, especially in the summer months, etc. And what I wanted to ask is, obviously there was a previous licence in place for Christchurch Borough Council, albeit it was longer hours. It's from 8 AM till midnight, and it included late night refreshment. Although I accept that neither the previous application nor this one include provision of alcohol, although that could be done through a temporary event notice. I guess it's a question for the applicants about, under the previous Christchurch Borough Council licence for this site, were there any issues? Did we experience complaints? Were there evidence of problems or disturbances or complaints from the neighbours where there are events taking place? Do we have anything on, you know, has there had to be enforcement action against the licence holders at all for anything in the past that's taken place there? Or have environmental health been called out to any events and stuff to sort things out, or the police at all? I think if we've got any knowledge or experience or evidence of any sort of previous issues with events, that would be really useful to help us in our deliberations. Yes, thank you, Helen. With regard to previous issues, although of course they don't always impact, we need to look at it as a snapshot in time, but you make a good point, Councillor Brown. Helen, thank you.
As far as I'm aware, no. Obviously, it was part of Christchurch Council when we weren't managing the events there, but my understanding is no, there hasn't been. What we do within the process within the centralised team, and what we do moving forward from now, is that we will always debrief an event. So if anything comes up from those we're called out, then we're aware of it, and we also follow up at the end of the year with our safety advisory group, and we debrief as a group, and within that SAG process, we would look at anything that came up the previous years to make sure that if an event was to take place a second year, that any of those issues are dealt with. And there has been occasions, not in Christchurch, but in other places, that if we don't feel an organiser can mitigate that, then we wouldn't allow the event to take place.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your question, David. Joanne McNamara, did you wish to speak?
Thank you, Chair. It was really only just to reaffirm what Becky said about the traffic not being one of the licensing objectives. Yes, traffic and parking, that was all, just to make that clear. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that clarification. And while we have you, HI, the comment made by the last objector, the impact of this application will no doubt encourage more traders, traffic, noise, pollution, rubbish, antisocial behaviour, and will not be to the benefit of local residents. in this area of outstanding attribute. I believe that Thwaites would apply there because we can't provide for anything which is an unknown.
You can't consider anything that isn't evidence before you, that is, as you say, that is unknown.
Right, and that's Thwaites' case.
Yes, and also whether it's to the benefit of the local residents or not, again, is not one of the licensing objectives.
Thank you very much. That's very useful. So the further part of that is then moving on to J of this objection. We understand that organisers are supposed to inform via the council local residents the possibility of disturbance from forthcoming events. This has never happened. I'd like some clarification on that, please.
Yes, so within the team that have, obviously we've got 3 councils come together, so within the team our process would be if there was an event that was of large enough that it was having an event management plan, we would ask the organisers to write to residents that are immediately in the roads and advise them, and that is something that is evidence that's happened in Bournemouth and in Poole previously. So that would be a case for any events that was to take place in Mudderford Quay. Generally, and this goes back to the noise management plan, if there is an element of music in there, then that would also include a contact number on the day for the residents. That's generally something we ask the organisers to do, and then obviously with that backup that I mentioned earlier, that we're an on-call process. If there is a problem, then we would obviously come out and deal with it and deal with that issue.
Yes, it is stated in the conditions, so that would cover that. Thank you very much. Joanne, did you wish to speak again? Your hand is up.
No, Chair, I did. I was just going to ask Helen a question about the telephone number provided to residents, but she's now clarified that. Thank you.
She shot your fox. Thank you.
She did. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. And so on to K. The style of events proposed should be carefully considered for this area and should be limited to a few days a year, as in the past, and with a cut-off time of 6 o'clock. We refer there to the environmental conditions that the number of events involving live recorded amplified music and that could impact on the neighbouring residential properties should be limited to 3 per calendar year. Could you advise us of that again with regard to that point, please, Helen?
Yes, so we would have a maximum of 3 events there that have the licensable conditions within the premise licence taking place at Mudderford Quay, and within their planning they would have to make sure that they give us a detailed information of what's happening that we agree. I think it's very difficult with open spaces premise licenses where we apply for that full time, but that doesn't mean that there's going to be something on there that full time. But it gives the premise license, it just allows that flexibility for a different event to take place. So I can understand that obviously for residents as a whole it looks like a great enormity, where in the reality it's a few events that will be well managed and have a process.
Thank you very much for that confirmation. So, members, then moving on to the last objection, I'll read it again, as I have before. Dear Becky Baker, I have read your response to a comment from a local resident about the above licence application signs, but I am a little confused as you mentioned the Carnival and Food Festival. These events are on Christchurch Quay and the signs we are concerned about are on Mudderford Quay and all along what we know as Friars Cliff Beach. Could you comment on that, please, Helen? There seems to be some confusion there.
I think they were given as examples of the style of events that take place within Christchurch rather than specifically. There's no plans for the Christchurch Food Festival to move to Mudderford Quay or to extend. There's nothing for that or indeed the circus. So I think that they were given as examples of events.
Thank you. I'm sure that will give some assurance. Does this mean you're also seeking to replace a previously identical licence for these areas held by Christchurch Council, or is this something totally new, as I'm not aware of any previous events of this nature held on the beach? Could you possibly answer that, please?
So there was this was in relation, I believe, to the Christchurch Beaches application, which we don't currently have anything specifically requesting it, which is the reason that we've withdrawn that next agenda point. So we were replacing like for like with a reduction and tighter conditions. That was the purpose of what we were doing it, but we've done it on the basis of those that we know that there are some planned events, rather than having and then assessing again once we've probably had a full event season when we come through the pandemic.
Yes, I understand, because obviously COVID has cessated all that issue. And then finally, as another local resident, it is only to be expected that we are concerned regarding events that might be held any day of the week from 10 a.m. until 11 p.m. at night in Mudford, whether at the quay or the beach. Key elements with regard to noise, rubbish, bottles or glass being left behind, particularly on the green and beach, two main reasons where children play. Again, I think Thwaites would apply there. I look forward to your reply as soon as possible, and as I'm writing on behalf of a number of other local residents and wish to forward your response to them prior to the 10th of March deadline. Members, are there any further questions? I think we've covered every point in detail, to be fair to our objectors, so that they weren't able to be here themselves, but I have aired their voice and hopefully we've gained some confirmation to their questions. Councillor David Brown, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, partly prompted by that last representation, which mentioned about rubbish and bottles and things. I note in the response from Environmental Health and the proposed conditions, which I believe have been accepted, it talks a lot, obviously, about the noise management plan and about noise disturbance from music and late night music, etc. But it doesn't talk about any sort of other noise disturbance which could be caused, and what I'm concerned about is potentially things like waste removal and clearing of a site. You know, under this licence you could have an event running up to 11 o'clock at night, and then they dismantle everything to do with the event, and you may have trucks and vehicle movements coming and taking down scaffolding. You may have waste removal trucks removing sort of large bin containers, you know, after 11 o'clock at night. That all constitutes noise disturbance to the residents surrounding that area, and I just wondered whether what any sort of comments relating to that, and whether we need to consider an additional sort of environmental health condition around that actually any sort of site movements or waste removal should be restricted in hours as well to avoid noise disturbance, or whether the noise management plan will cover that. But I just note that environmental health is very much talking about disturbance from music and not any other kind of noise disturbance.
Yes, thank you, David, for that. I'm just checking to see if there's anything in the general conditions offered, but I can't see anything. So, Helen, if you'd like to comment, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So, for the purpose of an event, we would see that any noise is part of that noise management plan. So, where you talk about anything being dismantled or being started, although that's not necessarily a licensable activity, it's an event consideration. So we would consider that within their build up and breakdown plan, and we would, within their noise management plan, we would want to see as an example of a generator, that you haven't got a noisy generator that's outside your resident property, because that could cause as much of a disturbance to them as music could cause them. So that's part of the wider event planning process that isn't necessarily, and we haven't put it on here because it's not the licensable side of the activity. And just on the waste as well, just to go through that again, that would be part of a part of the process, part of our agreement with the organiser of what they need to do. And quite often, if it's a new organiser or if there's any specific concern, quite often then a reinstatement is also taken from that operator, to make sure that if there was anything that was left that wasn't tidied up, that they then have to pay for the cost of that to tidy anything up. So that is all tied up in the event processes.
Yes, thank you. So I think, David, the answer there is obviously under environmental requirements, it is covered, but it's not a licensable activity per se, but it is covered under the environmental requirements. Thank you very much for raising that. So are there any other questions? Councillor Richard Burton. Thank you, Richard.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Sorry, I'm going to go back in time slightly because I had my hand up from when you were talking about noise earlier on. Yep. I was just looking on page 90, the noise level between 65 and 70 decibels level. Yep. Can I just ask, is that just a standard taken from environmental health, those numbers.
Helen, could you answer Councillor Burton, please?
Yeah, that is a general one that would be taken as that is an acceptable point of numbers, but depending on that has to go alongside the noise management plan. So that also depends on the frequency, the length of time, the duration, so that that isn't throughout a whole day of a 12-hour set, for example. There's various different aspects that go alongside that, so it's not just one of its own on its own. It's in context with other parts. Nananka might be able to help out as licensing manager because she's more of an expert on noise than myself.
Yes, thank you. I'll invite you, Nananka, if you'd like to comment. Thank you, Nananka.
Yeah, thank you. Just I don't know if you're aware, but I also used to be environmental health officer, and I do hold a diploma in acoustics and noise control management. So I do this aspect before I did the licensing. So the levels stated are taken from the old Institute of Guidance documents, Code of Practice for Outside Noise Events, which is actually widely recognised as a standard background level of plus 15 decibels, and that is sort of up and down throughout the day, and it's taken in a 15-minute sort of snapshot throughout the day. So yes, it is a standardised, recognised level, so it's not just been plucked out of the air. Don't worry.
Can I just ask something? I'm glad I'm glad you've got the technical because my next question is slightly technical because it says specifically 63 hertz and 125 hertz. Why specifically those frequencies? And should it not actually be between 63 hertz and 125 hertz rather than stating actual frequencies?
Because it's the 1/3 octaves that the noise level meters measure. So you measure the 1/3 octaves, which is 63, 125, 250, 500, 1K, and up. Okay. So when you're measuring them, it's those 2 octaves that you look for, and you just need to make sure that they're not peak because they're the lower frequency that travel further than the higher frequency noise levels.
Yeah, because I would also wonder why dBA was used on there, but I think I might be getting too technical there. But
yes, dBA is what the ear hears. It's weighted for what we actually hear, rather than just a linear measurement of sound. So any measurement of sound is always measured in that dBA weighting.
Yeah, no, I understand that. It's just that when you then, because it's weighted on what you hear, you don't hear 63 to 125 decibels very well. So dBA actually takes off. And then restating that, it seems to go against what DBZ I would have thought for that, but I'll leave it because we all getting technical here.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. But rest assured that those levels that are being set are acceptable levels, and Nananka, and thank you, Richard, for raising that. Are there any? Nananka, you still have your hand up. Is that a legacy hand, or did you wish to speak again?
No, it's older. I'll take it down.
Thank you very much. So members, any further questions? Nope. Okay. And Becky, you don't have any questions for Helen?
No, I don't have any questions for Helen.
Thank you very much. So now then, we will go to summing up. And the person who spoke last gets to speak first. So Helen, I believe that you were last to speak. So if you'd like to sum up your case, and then I'll move to Becky. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So in summary, in terms of events on BCP Council land, there is a robust and nationally recognised industry standard of an event management plan and safety advisory group process, which covers all multi-agencies and key components from the local authority to ensure that events are run safely and don't cause a disruption to the local area. We feel we have agreed representations with environmental health and with the police to come to terms that we all agree as conditions of the licence, which we're happy with. So we feel that with the number of events that we are potentially looking at, that this would be a reasonable number for Mudderford Quay, and that there's appropriate processes in place to make sure that any residents that have concerns can be contacted during an event.
Thank you very much. Nananka, you have your hand up. Did you wish to speak? Nananka Randall, you have your hand up. Did you wish to speak?
Sorry, it's down on my end. So
that's okay, no problems. Thank you very much. Yes, that's absolutely fine. Thank you. Wondered if you just had a comment there, but it's legacy hand. Thank you. Thank you, Helen. Becky Baker, did you have your opportunity to sum up as the report writer?
I've got nothing further to add. I think Helen's covered it all. I'll just say now it's for members to decide whether the application's granted, refused or granted with additional conditions added.
Thank you very much. So with that in turn then, members, thank you very much to all participants, and this particular hearing with regard to this matter is now concluded. I will carry on to items 7 and 8, and then after 7 and 8 we will retire to deliberate in private with the legal advisor and clerk present. And just to advise you that notification of the committee's decision will be given within the period of 5 working days, beginning with the day or the last day in which the hearing was held, which is today, in accordance with the regulations. And the notification of decision will include information about the right of appeal as appropriate. And I will just ask at this juncture if Linda Cole, our legal advisor, could explain the right of appeal. Thank you, Linda.
Thank you, Chair.
I'm sorry, not Linda, Joanne. I beg your pardon.
That's okay, Chair.
I'm so used to Linda appearing. Joanne, thank you. Bless you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, there's a right of appeal in relation to the decision of the Licensing Committee, and that appeal period starts 21 days from the date notifications received in writing, and the appeal is to the Magistrates' Court.
Thank you very much, Joanne. So moving on then to item 7, which is consideration of new premises licence for Barrack Road Recreational Ground, Christchurch. This has been withdrawn, so there's no hearing. And item 8 is an application for new premises licence for Southbourne Snooker Bar, 8 Deans Road, Southbourne, Bournemouth. This item is to be deferred until the licensing subcommittee meeting on the 15th of April 2021 in order to comply with timescales of the hearing regulations. So I will now ask that Max ends the live streaming, and I will close this meeting. Thank you very much, members of
Councillor Bagwell joined after we started item 6.
Yes.
So for the purposes of deliberation in relation to item 6, then Councillor Bagwell can't be involved in the decision making.
Yes. Thank you. Yes, thank you, Joanna. Yes, Julie, just seconds past my starting time. I'm sorry about that, but we won't be able to invite you to deliberate with us because under the Licensing Act, you need to be with us for the whole of the hearing, and missing that 15 seconds at the beginning, unfortunately, means that you can't be with us for the deliberation. But thank you very much for your attendance today, Councillor Blackwell. So I'll now close the public meeting, and I'll ask that Max ends the live streaming. Thank you very much.